Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Apoorva Mandhani and I have with me Mr. Yashwant Sinha, former Union Finance and External Affairs Minister with the Vajpayee-led NDA government and most recently the opposition's joint presidential candidate in the last polls. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
So to begin with, I'd like to begin with your journey. You were a bureaucrat before you joined politics and then you had a long, successful, fruitful political career as well. For our viewers, could you tell maybe a high point of your entire career?
I'll have to think. Well, I suppose the early high point was getting into the Indian Administrative Service.
Right.
And that gave me a lot of experience on the ground, in the Secretariat here in Bihar, again in the Government of India.
Right.
I even had a foreign posting to the then West Germany. So I spent a little over 24 years in the IAS, and I was Joint Secretary in the Government of India when I decided to leave.
Right.
And the reason why I decided to leave, among others, was that I felt that, you know, after Joint Secretary I'll be Additional Secretary, then I'll be Secretary. And I'll be doing more or less the same work that I was doing as Joint Secretary.
Right.
So I didn't want to go through that experience again and again. And I had 12 years of service left when I decided to call it a day. Now, after leaving the IAS, what would I do? That was a big question. And then politics took a very peculiar turn in the sense that Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated, and then Rajiv Gandhi became the Prime Minister of India. He called for early elections. I had in the meanwhile got attached to the Chandrasekhar camp. And Chandrasekhar was the president of the Janata Party at that time. So I got attached to him, and then came the elections, and I requested Chandrasekhar to give me a nomination to stand from Hazaribagh.
Right.
So I came to Hazaribagh in 1984 and contested the Lok Sabha election here, ending up with by getting only about 10,000 votes in a Lok Sabha election.
Right.
But as I have said on many occasions, that I might have lost that election, but I found a constituency.
Right.
And after that, I did not look back, in the sense that I did not, like many other leaders, go looking for a Lok Sabha constituency or hopping from one Lok Sabha constituency to another. So I was stuck to Hazaribagh. I have contested elections from here regularly from 1998 onwards.
Right.
And I lost one, I won 3 elections. And then in 2014, I called it a day, and my son took over.
Right.
He was a MP from here for 2 terms, and this time he has opted out. So the BJP nomination has gone to somebody else.
Right. That's what I want to talk about next. Maybe now you said a very nice thing. You said that you found a constituency, and since 1998, I mean, you are the famed Sinhas of Hazaribagh, so to say. And since 1998, there hasn't been one election where, you know, somebody from your family hasn't stood for it. But this time it's different. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Why is it different this time?
You know, if you're a public representative,
right,
at any level, and especially if you are a member of parliament in the Lok Sabha, then also your constituents expect you to do all their small work.
Right.
So what are the small works that they expect you to do? They'll bother about the house in which they are living, then the road on which the house is, drinking water, means of communication,
right,
and various other very petty local issues. And then they have personal issues like getting admission for their child in some good school or college,
right,
getting employment for their children, for which they come to the local member of parliament. And my experience would show that the local member of parliament is the chief grievance officer also of his constituency.
Okay.
So if anyone has any grievance with the administration at any level, then they'll come to you and expect you to solve those problems.
Right.
My experience as a member of Lok Sabha would show that you have to be constantly available to your constituents. Even if you're not in the constituency, you have to be available on the phone.
Right.
I mean, I have that very funny example of some young people here who were, riding a scooter, and 3 of them were on a particular scooter, and the police stopped them and asked them to show their papers, and they had none of the papers. So what do? They called me.
Oh wow, okay.
I was in Delhi and they said, look sir, the police has stopped us, and will you speak to the policeman? And the policeman would, when he learned that I was on the other side, he just ran away from there. He would not like to speak to me. So that kind of thing would happen. So wherever you are, I remember I was in San Francisco one day, and people here are not aware of the time difference. So at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, they'll call me and they'll say, oh uncle or sir, this is what has happened, and without asking me where I was in the world. So this kind of experience. The point I'm making is, even as a member of the Lok Sabha, you are supposed to attend to all the grievances of the people in your constituency and look after their small needs. Even if you're not in the constituency or away for some urgent other work. So that's it. That's the life of a member of parliament. I realized in 2014 that perhaps I was not in a position anymore on account of my age to run around and do all kinds of errands.
Right.
So I decided to opt out. And that's when my son, who was a corporate executive, decided to come here and contest.
Right.
And the Bharatiya Janata Party was nice enough to give them the nomination when I told them very firmly that I was not going to contest.
Right.
So he was here. He won the last election by a bigger margin than even the Prime Minister of India. But this time he decided to opt out, or was told to opt out, so he is not in the field.
Why did that happen? And so your son Yashwant Sinha is supposed to be one of the brightest ministers. We know that even as Minister of State, Mr. Arun Jaitley used to appreciate him a lot. So why did he opt out, or as you said, was made to opt out?
I don't really know. I mean, that's an explanation which the powers that be in the BJP would have to explain. But I was as surprised as you when I was told that he was not going to get the nomination. Somebody else from here would be the BJP candidate for the Lok Sabha election. Even when I came here and started talking to people, they all told me that, they don't understand why Yashwant Sinha was denied a nomination this time. Nothing is clear. But maybe Modi ji does not need people like him in the party or in parliament. Right.
Since you opted out of politics, you've been critical of a few policies, at least, of the Modi government. Do you think that somewhere played a role in why your son wasn't given a ticket this time?
You see, I started, actually formally left the BJP in 2018.
Right.
And even before that, I was critical of some of its policies. I became more vocal in my criticism.
Right.
After 2018, when I left the party. So my position was very clear in 2019. But in 2019, they decided, despite my opposition to the BJP, to give the nomination to Yashwant Sinha again. So it is not clear to me why.
Okay, why now?
5 years later, they would deny him the ticket on my count. The other point which I'd like to make is that, it's not unlikely or unusual for members of the same family to be on different sides in politics.
I wanted to talk about that actually.
Yeah, there are many examples where people have been in different parties. But if I am the reason for his being denied this nomination, I would only say I am very sorry for it, and this should not have been the reason, because we are two different individuals. Jayant Sinha served the party and the constituency to the best of his abilities, and never allowed my criticism to come in the way of his duties.
And we've seen that. Now, just to come to that, the point that you made, we've seen that you've lent support to the Congress candidate, but we've seen that your son Jayant Sinha tweeted in support of the BJP candidate still after he wasn't denied ticket. Is there a split within the Sinha family about their political choices?
There has been a split.
Okay.
There has been a split since 2018 when I left the BJP.
Okay.
And Jayant has been a very loyal member of the BJP, and I have been its critic. So that situation continues even today.
Right. I'm sure that makes dinner time conversations really interesting.
We keep it out.
Okay.
We keep politics strictly out of dinner time conversation.
Okay. So now for the Hazaribagh seat, has the family vacated it for good, or will we see another family member stepping in? We also had rumors of your grandson Ashir probably stepping into politics in the future sometime.
Jayant is around 60, 61.
Right.
So he is still young. He has many years to go in case he opts to remain in politics. His son Ashir is only 23, still 2 years away from attaining the age of contesting elections in India. So, and he's just come back after finishing his studies from the US.
Right.
And he has a professional career ahead of him. And if my view prevails in the family, I would say that he is still too young. Even 2 years later, he will still be too young. And both Jayant and I have shown that it is good to enter politics after having a lot of experience of another field.
Right, right.
That makes you more is likely to make you more successful in politics.
So you're saying that he's too young, but maybe in the future the door's still open for him to probably.
Depends on him.
Right.
10 years, 20 years later, what would he think? Depends on him.
Right. As for your son, Jayant Sinha, what are his future prospects like? Has he discussed them with you? Do you have any idea what he's planning to do next?
No, I think we'll wait for the result of these elections.
Right.
See which way this constituency turns, see which way the national elections go.
Right.
And I think it will be after that that it will be proper for both Jayant and for me to take a look at the future.
Right. I in fact wanted to talk to you about these elections then in Hazaribagh. What is your assessment of these elections?
I think it's a very keenly contested election, and the Congress candidate, the Congress party had no standing here.
Right.
In the many years that we have been contesting elections from here, Congress party has been contesting, but they have been a very poor second. So this time though, for various reasons, the Congress party candidate is giving a tough time to the BJP candidate.
Right.
And I would not be surprised if he wins the election.
Right. Of course, I mean, you also lent him support, and your word plays a huge role in Hazaribagh.
I have lent my support to him because for various reasons, I don't want the BJP candidate to win.
Okay.
Because he will not be a good MP. That's what my opinion is.
Right.
From Hazaribagh.
Okay. And if we talk about the Lok Sabha elections generally, what's your assessment of the situation? Where do you think this will go if we talk about numbers?
Nationwide.
Nationwide, yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I have not. I have been talking to people in various parts of the country.
Right.
But I have not visited any other place because I have been here in Hazaribagh. But from what I hear and what I see, it appears to me that It's a tough election for the BJP, and people perhaps by and large are not in a mood to give a third term to Mr. Modi.
Right.
I might mention to you, you will be aware that in the US there is a constitutional provision that a president can remain in office only for two terms.
That's right.
And each term is 4 years. So he remains in office for a total of 8 years.
Yeah.
Both John F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy was, of course, assassinated. Obama was very young when he demitted office
Right.
After his second term. So why is this? The argument behind this is that if you want to do anything, any good to your people, then 8 years is a long enough period. Here the term is 5 years. So after 10 years, you can't come back to the people and say, look, I couldn't do it in the last 10 years, but if you give me another 5 years, then I'm going to give you this, and this is my guarantee.
Right.
This whole talk of a guarantee sounds absolutely hollow from someone who has been in office for 10 years.
Right, right. So, okay, I know that you said you haven't traveled around, but still, if you could talk about a few states, where do you think there'll be, an uptake, or could you give us a few examples of
No,
that?
I like to mention this general point to you that in the last two elections, BJP had already touched the ceiling.
Right, okay.
In various states where it's strong, especially in the so-called Hindi belt.
Right.
And even in Karnataka. Now, when you touch the upper limit, then you can only go down from there.
Right.
Or there is absolutely no space. Unless you say that I'll win 16 or 18 seats in Jharkhand, where the number of seats is only 14.
Right.
That is point number one, which I'd like to make. Point number two, which I'd like to make, is BJP's slogan has been Ab ki baar 400 par,
yes.
more than 400.
Right.
Now, nobody in the BJP
Yeah.
has ever explained in all these months where are these additional 100 seats going to come from?
Right.
Where are they going to come from? Are they going to come from Rajasthan, where you have already touched the ceiling, Gujarat, where you already touched the ceiling, Himachal, Delhi, where? Unless you're going to get, let's say, 20 out of 39 seats in Tamil Nadu, or you are going to sweep Kerala,
Right.
or Telangana, or Andhra, or Orissa, or Bengal for that
Right.
matter, which is extremely unlikely. So everyone that I am aware of is talking about the BJP numbers going down in this election. And there is a certain amount of, what shall I say, there is a certain amount of boredom, there is a certain amount of impatience now,
Right.
because after all, BJP has been in power Mr. Modi has been in power for 10 years. And as I said, you become stale after 10 years.
Right.
And you can't make any fresh promises, because that will carry no weight with the people. And if the assessment of various people is right, then BJP, along with its allies, is unlikely to get a majority in
Right.
the Lok Sabha. And if they don't get a majority, then obviously somebody else will get that majority. And that somebody else is the India Alliance.
Right. So, let alone, not a majority, and let alone 400 up ki par 400 par. So, you don't think that's possible at all?
Absolutely no. I don't know why BJP has got into this habit of making or fixing impossible targets.
Right.
We are sitting here in Jharkhand. In the last assembly election, they said, ab ki bar 65 par. It's a house of 82. And they said 65 par, 65. They ended up getting 25. And they have lost the government.
Right.
In Bengal, you will recall, in the assembly elections again, they said ab ki bar 200 par. They got 77.
Right.
In Karnataka, they said ab ki bar halfway mark plus 13. This is what Amit Shah said. They did not get majority and they lost power.
Right.
So you make these impossible, fix these impossible targets only to keep your cadres enthused.
Okay.
So that they work.
So just talking about these elections then, there has been a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric from PM Modi, especially during his campaigning. At the moment, it's really gone up. What do you think about it?
I feel extremely sorry. I feel very distressed
Right.
that the Prime Minister of India, which is multilingual, multi-religious, multiracial,
Right.
and India which is so variegated, that the Prime Minister of India should be talking about communal issues, including Hindu-Muslim.
Right.
Mr. Modi has been trying his best, his hardest, to make this into a communal election, like it was in 2014, like it was in 2019, and like it was in all his Gujarat elections, assembly elections.
Right.
But you know, I must give full credit to both the Hindu community as well as the Muslim community, because they are not falling for it.
Right.
So there is no tension, and this is the first election after 2009 where there is no wave. You know, people are not somehow enthusiastic about the election.
Right.
There is no wave. They are not determined that this fellow must be unseated or this person must be brought back to Parliament. There is nothing of that kind. People will perhaps go and cast their vote, but they are indifferent.
Right. So you give credit to the people, to the Hindus as well as the Muslims. Is there any credit that you give to the Election Commission of India? How do you think that's working?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think the Election Commission of India has covered itself in mud in these elections. They have shown absolutely no courage, you know, except to go for a small fry.
Right.
They haven't even had the courage to issue a notice to Mr. Modi for a highly communal speech.
Right.
The notice was issued to the BJP president.
Right.
The Election Commission, and then let me also make another point. Election Commission revising its poll figures.
Yeah.
That raises many questions. I have been holding elections as a bureaucrat. I have been contesting elections, and you know, there is a Form 17C which is compiled at the end of the election at the booth level, and the agent of the polling of the candidate have the right to ask the presiding officer to give them a copy of that Form 17C. And I used to insist, when I was contesting elections from here, I used to tell my polling agents that from your booth you must collect the Form 17C and deliver it to me the same evening. Now, the Form 17C is the final account of how many votes have been cast. So how can that suddenly go up? Unless the explanation of the Election Commission is they did not get all the Form 17C. Why didn't they get all the Form 17C?
That's also questionable.
That's also questionable. So how can the percentage go up suddenly from 61 to 67 or something?
Right.
And a few crore voters would be added to the list of voters. There is no satisfactory explanation, and as I said, the Election Commission doesn't appear to be a fair arbiter in these elections.
Okay, and since we're talking about agencies, we can't talk about agencies without mentioning the Enforcement Directorate. I just want to know that when you were finance minister, the ED still came under you. What was its role like back then, and do you think that's changed now?
I didn't even bother about the work of the ED.
Right.
As finance minister, I was more than 4 years as finance minister.
Right.
I did not even bother about the work of the ED. That is a professional body which was doing its work.
Right.
And I had nothing to do with it. You know. So this time around, I'm shocked that the ED is behaving in such a partisan manner. And I have come to the conclusion that you are honest only as long as you are in government. Once you are out of government,
Right.
and you have a regime, another regime which comes into power, and that's a vindictive regime, then they let all these ED and CBI and enforcement income tax after you. And even if there is nothing against you, what happens in the media? You lose your reputation.
Is that a recent phenomenon that you've been seeing?
This is a completely recent phenomenon. Last 10 years,
Last 10 years.
they have been misusing all these agencies of the government.
Talking about your state, I mean, we had CM Hemant Soren being arrested by the ED as well, and he was forced to pass the baton then. What do you have to say about this entire controversy?
No, it's very unfortunate that this should happen both in the case of Hemant Soren and in the case of
Arvind
Arvind Kejriwal,
Yeah.
just during elections or just before the elections. So what are you trying to prove
Right.
or show? You are trying to show that these are opponents that I fear. They are popular in their own states, and I'll arrest them and keep them out of the reckoning on their home turf.
Right.
Fortunately, the Supreme Court has given permission to Kejriwal to get released from jail and go on campaign.
Right. So then, who do you think is the best fit to counter the BJP? Do you think is somebody like Rahul Gandhi, or do you think it's someone like Mamata
No,
Banerjee?
I would say no. I wouldn't go into personalities.
Right.
You know, if you look at the history of Indian political developments, you will find that every time there has been a leader who is the projected candidate for prime ministership in an election, it is because the party has no other leader.
Okay.
And one person dominates.
That's right.
So it was Jawaharlal Nehru, it was Indira Gandhi, it is Modi now. It is completely contrary to the constitutional arrangement that we have. Because after all, we are not a presidential system.
Right.
We are a parliamentary democracy. And in a parliamentary democracy, the members of parliament, Lok Sabha, would have the right to choose their leader after they are elected. Even today, you have to go through that formality. But why don't you trust them, their judgment that they would elect the leader after they themselves get elected?
Right, right. So then, okay, just if we talk about between Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi, if we are just talking about opposition generally, who do you think is better suited to lead the party and the opposition?
No, I would not like to venture an opinion on personalities.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Just going back again, you've been very close to Mr. Vajpayee as well. Do you see any imprint of the Vajpayee government in this government, and what do you think? How do you think Mr. Vajpayee would look at this government?
I'm sure he must be very, very dismayed
Okay.
in heaven. Because Mr. Vajpayee was a very different sort of a person. He never allowed the small petty considerations to affect his judgment while in government. And the 6 years that we worked together in his government, I would say there was not a single occasion where he might have resorted to igniting communal flames.
Right.
Never once.
So do you think that's the main difference? Are there other differences between the Vajpayee government and the current Modi?
There is another very major difference.
Okay.
Vajpayee was a very tall leader, but he never tried to dominate the party like Mr. Modi does. And Mr. Vajpayee was very democratic in his approach. So whether in the party or in the government, we all expressed our views as freely as possible. And I, as finance minister, had a very difficult job.
Right.
I was often in a minority of one in the cabinet. So it was only with Mr. Vajpayee's support that I was able to do my duty. And he was a very fair person.
Right.
He overruled me many times, but never said you can't express an opinion. Here I am told nobody has any right or the authority to express their views.
Tell me a bit more about this, because like I said, we know that you were really close to Mr. Vajpayee. Was there a falling out that happened with PM Modi? What exactly happened?
Falling out with whom?
With Mr. Modi, with PM Modi. Did that happen within the party with you?
No, I didn't like the way things were under him. And I waited, as I said, for a few years.
Right.
And when I was convinced that the country was taking a wrong turn under him, then I decided to part ways.
Right. And you've of course been the finance minister, but in the past 10 years, you've also been a keen observer of the government generally. How do you think about the economy? How do you think the government has handled it in the past 10 years?
The government has made one mistake after another.
Okay.
Some of them were very disastrous. Some of them were pernicious.
Right.
To give you just one example,
yes.
Take demonetization. If you look at the figures of annual growth rate of the economy, you will find that before demonetization, we were growing at the rate of about 8% per annum. After demonetization, it plummeted to 4%.
Right.
And then slowly picked up. Then came COVID and it had its own impact on the economy. I don't think we are where we were pre-COVID or even pre-demonetization. The pernicious effect of demonetization, it was not an innocent mistake. The pernicious impact was that you will recall that after demonetization, the entire currency and more perhaps, which was in circulation, came back into the banking system. So what does that show? It all became white. Unless you proceed against those who deposited black money in banks.
Right.
But I am not aware of any large-scale seizure of black money as a result of the money in circulation coming back into the banks.
Right.
In fact, I am not aware of a single case which was started after demonetization against black money hoarders. So what does that mean? That means that the entire black money in this country has become white. And nobody is talking about it. Nobody in the BJP, Mr. Modi asked for 30 days. You remember his Goa speech? Give me 30 days. It has been years after that. And nobody in the BJP would like to talk about demonetization. So that was a disaster. The manner in which the goods and services tax was implemented, that was a disaster. It caused a huge setback to the economy. And finally, what I'd like to say is that government is dressing up the figures.
I wanted to come to that because you mentioned that according to you, we haven't gone back to the pre-COVID times or even pre-demonetization times, but the government has been claiming that we're catching up or we have caught up, and you know, they're citing figures for it. Could you tell a little bit about this?
See, when I was finance minister, I set up a National Statistical Commission by an act of parliament.
Right.
What was the idea behind it? The idea was that we should have an independent body which will be responsible for collection, collation and dissemination of statistics.
Right.
And I remember when I was finance minister, I often used to see a day before figures which were not flattering. You know, it showed that economy was not doing well or there were other issues. So what did I do? I did not stop them from coming out in public domain.
Right.
They came out and I faced the situation and tried to correct the situation. But in this case, what the government is doing is they don't allow those figures which go against it to come out in public domain.
Right.
They suppress those figures or dress up those figures so that people get a completely a wrong opinion.
How does that dressing up happen? If you could explain it a little bit for our viewers, I think it will be helpful for them.
It's very simple. Take the inflation figures, for instance. You know,
Right.
there is a trick. If it's 7.4,
Right.
then it's 7%.
Hmm.
If it's 7.5,
Right.
then it's 8%.
Hmm.
Okay. Any figure, inflation,
Of course.
growth, anything. So all that you need to do is to raise it by 20 basis points or 10 basis points, and you will have a whole percent which is higher.
Right.
You know. So the clever people in government, if the politicians are willing, would do this to ensure that people are, given the wrong figures and they are impressed by it. And one more thing I'd like to tell you.
Right.
Mr. Modi has proved that prachar, publicity is everything. Whether you do your work well or don't do your work well, if you do massive publicity, then people in the street will start to believe
Right.
that, this is what the government take, for instance, one issue, if you can use a Hindi expression,
Absolutely. Go ahead.
विदेशों में डंका बज रहा है.
I wanted to get to that actually. It's like you're reading my mind.
You know, विदेशों में डंका बज रहा है भारत का. So you go and talk to the man in the street, he say कि हाँ ये वो, but विदेशों में डंका बज रहा है.
Right.
Now nobody has gone to see कि वो डंका बज रहा है कि नहीं बज रहा है. हाँ? Ask them, have you gone to England, Europe, US, Russia, wherever, to see कि डंका बज रहा है कि नहीं बज रहा है? No. Where does he? WhatsApp University.
Right.
He's saying this is what is happening, this is what is happening. मोदी का डंका बज रहा है.
So all the talk about global stature, the country's global stature being
because
really...
people are going to be impressed by your global stature. In terms of global stature, Mr. Modi is nowhere compared to Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He is nowhere compared to Indira Gandhi. He is nowhere compared to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. But he is supposed to be the greatest Prime Minister India has ever had because unka danka baj raha hai.
Right.
Completely wrong. I'll give you an example. When I was External Affairs Minister, I traveled to Washington. And when I arrived there, our ambassador told me that my first appointment, I was going to have talks with my counterpart in the State Department. But he told me that my first appointment the next morning was in the White House with the President of the US, Mr. Bush, at that time. So I was a little surprised because the President normally would not meet a minister of a government. So, but then I went to White House, I met President Bush. I have that famous photograph of Bush and me sitting in the Oval Office under that mantelpiece. Nobody before me and nobody after me has had this honor or distinction to meet the President of the US one-on-one in the Oval Office in the White House. Okay. So we didn't go around, we didn't go to town saying Danka baj raha hai. Inka itna Danka baj raha hai. Has any minister of the Vajpayee government met the US President? Danka baj raha hai. So he has proved that it is not important whether you do your work or don't do your work. Make tall claims and you will get the desired results.
Now, I won't take much of your time. Just another question on, there's been a lot of talk, especially during these elections, about inheritance tax. What do you have to say about that controversy?
I think it's an idle controversy. Nobody has, from the opposition, has ever talked about inheritance tax. What poor Sam Pitroda said was, there is inheritance tax in various countries. That's all. And they said, oh, he wants to impose inheritance tax here. It's on nobody's agenda that there should be inheritance tax. And it's an unnecessary controversy raised by no less a person than the Prime Minister of India.
And during elections.
During elections, to just impress some voters.
Now, I'll just end it here. What is your plan for the next 10 years for our viewers?
Just manage to live.
Okay. Okay, this was Mr. Yashwant Sinha talking to The Print. Thank you so much for watching and thank you so much for joining us, sir. This is Apoorva Mandhani along with photojournalist Manisha Mondal reporting for The Print.